Welcome back for another edition of Talking Tilton. Today, we're sitting down with John Bruno and Caroline Bruno-Pfab. And guys, your family actually has a really rich history in Tilton. Caroline, tell me a little bit about your family, because they're the ones that actually bought and started the Tilton Theater, right?
I was always told that after my grandfather had two or three heart attacks, they moved to Tilton and they bought the Tilton Theater. And my grandfather, he had my father manage the things because his health wasn't that good. And I guess at one time, I understand that they had a hot popcorn machine outside the theater, and I think my mother met my father there, and that's all I know about how they met. I figured that's how they met. But when I was the first grandchild for the Brunos, and I was spoiled terribly, and they doted over me, and my grandfather, I was only no more than 2 years old, and he'd take me down to the theater, let me stand on a table where they used to sell candy, and he'd say, sing a Catalina, sing a Catalina, dance a Catalina. I was only 2 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
And I can actually remember being put on that table. And somebody said, it's because you've seen a picture. I've never seen a picture of me doing that.
Really?
And, of course, they've told me that I did it, so maybe that... But I can seem to remember standing and seeing all these people coming by and smiling, and Nono being out there pumping his arm, sing it. It's a wonder I didn't fall off the table. But they really doted over me being the first grandchild.
And there's nothing wrong with being spoiled, you know.
Well, unfortunately, next door to where we lived on Prospect Hill, it was like a duplex. Next door to my grandparents, my mother's parents, I had an uncle that was 16 that, although we were always taught to call him uncle, he was just turned 16 after I was born. So he always was like a big brother to me, and to Johnny too. But I had two maiden aunts upstairs that I didn't realize till I got figured out. They had just graduated from high school, so we were pretty well spoiled, and we got pretty much what we wanted. And I had an invalid grandmother that lived up there that if ever Mama got mad at me, I could always run up and say, Mommy's going to spank me. And she wouldn't let them spank us. And in those days, Tilton was a perfect place for any child to be raised.
Oh, I can only imagine.
I remember, we used to call them little hobos that would go run on the railroad tracks. And they would come up, and they would say, can I do something for a sandwich? And which my mother always did. And so I'll go make you a sandwich and get you a cup of coffee. But now you tell me first what I can do. And she said, you don't have to do anything. But they would not do anything. We never had a person ever ask for something, no matter how down and out they were. But they wouldn't do it if you could not reimburse. So Mama would usually say, well, I got some weeds in my little garden out there with the flowers. You can weed those. But they would do it. And they were so thankful and appreciative of anything anybody did. Mm-hmm. And so we never were afraid of hobos, because they were always poor, but very, very nice and appreciative.
Right.
And we had those right up until, Johnny was born then, because he's 3 years and a half younger than me.
Okay.
So he was always my baby brother.
So you guys got along pretty well together?
Oh, we got along wonderfully. plea until we moved over to West Main Street.
Uh-oh.
Because I had an aunt who was very tiny,
Mm-hmm.
and she wore a size 1 shoe, and she wore really high heels. So I was wearing her shoes when I was 3 or 4 years old, playing, and then we got all because they were raised in like flappers in the 1920s, so they had all those flapper type clothes, and they gave us to play with them. And I dressed Johnny up. I'd have him have tea parties with me. We got along really good. But when we moved away, he met a little boy that lived across the street from us, who was his age, and he says, "Boys don't do that." So for a while it got pretty rough, but finally we decided we could play games that we'd hear on the radio, counter spies and cowboys and stuff. So that I had a little girlfriend that lived just a block away. So I had a little girlfriend, and he finally had a little boy to play with, which he had never had before.
Mm-hmm.
So that made him very happy.
So, John, I have to ask you, what did it feel like to you being dressed up?
No, you don't want to ask me.
Oh, come on now. I mean, let's face it. If I would have had a sister, I think she would have done the same.
I didn't know the difference.
No, I get it. I totally get it.
I was brought up, when I was a little kid like that, I had her, and there was what turned out to be one of my classmates down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So all I knew was girls.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's better when you're older.
Yes, it is. I will totally agree with that. So, I mean, in ways, yes, she was your best friend growing up. I totally love that story. That's cool. So, I have to ask you, Caroline, growing up, I've always wanted to own a theater. What was it like having a family that owned a theater in town?
What it was like? As soon as you get old enough to do something, you become part of that theater running. Johnny, he must have been 8 years old, so 8 or 9 years old, and he was picking up the seats and helping sweep. And as soon as I turned, I think I was 12 when I started to usher, and our lives arrived. We were there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Mama couldn't take us to the movies all the time, but we had aunts and uncles that would take us, especially my aunts. The young women, they all like to go to the movies too. And unlike today, where you pay a fortune to go see one movie and they have 50 million movies playing at one time, we used to have only one movie a day. If on big shows like Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, they were full movies that played 2 days because they were the big movies. Mm-hmm. Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday were more the B movies. Saturday always had to be a cowboy or detective, something like that. But and Tuesdays and Thursdays were more like the really detective or things like that. They were the B movies. But we always had, we had double features, and people paid, when we were little, they were paying 7 cents to children and 10 cents for adults.
Okay.
Then they went up from 7 cents to 10 cents, and the adults were paying 15 cents. When I got married in 1956, I think, if I remember right, I don't even think that the people paid I hadn't gone up to $1 yet, had it? I don't think that it would cost admission to go at night. It didn't cost, I think it was 75 cents for adults and maybe 45 cents for children at night. It was cheaper if they went in the afternoon. And I remember when I would go down to visit my cousins in Manchester, I could not believe that some of them had to pay a whole dollar to go to see a movie.
Wow.
And now when you see what you go, the last time you went to a movie, what did you have to pay to see it?
Oh, jeez.
And we gave them a free movie every Christmas. We would open up the theater at 2:00 in the afternoon. We wouldn't even be in the Daddy would not even be in the ticket booth, and we would have short subjects and cartoons free for the children. And they just came in and watched the movie free. And he did that every Christmas. There was usually the day before Christmas. And I think it was always the day before Christmas or Saturday before Christmas.
Wow.
But that was their treat for all the children in the school. We never charged any of the clergy, any minister. They were always allowed to bring their whole family. They could come to every change. People could see 3-4 movies a week. They could come every night and do costume set. We never charged any of the clergy in the town.
And I know back in the day, Tilton was a hopping place, so I would imagine it had to be packed quite a bit.
It was. I mean, except for when we had the minstrel shows and things at the town hall once a year, and the theater was the main attraction in the town.
And we had some stage shows too.
I mean, you had the what?
Stage shows.
Oh yeah, we had we had a group from Manchester that would come up a couple times a year. They what was the name, Johnny?
Duke and his Swing Billies.
Yeah, and the leader was an Italian guy, and he would always sing a couple of songs in Italian for my Nona. And I can't help but remember her sitting there just holding her arms in front of her, just swaying and she'd start to sing to herself. And that always made her so happy to have them sing in Italian to her. But then we would get every once in a while there'd be something special that would come and we'd put on a big thing. And I'll let Johnny tell you about the bank nights. And evidently, I don't remember it myself, so it might have been before I was born. They used to give away what now is worth a lot of money, what it was called depression glass. So
Okay.
if you know anything about it, and antiques. And so my mother had a lot of it. And I didn't realize until she explained one day that they used to give it away on certain nights. They would have drawings for that, and they would give away this. And if you had it today, you could get a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
And every time we'd have just sandwiches and stuff for the family or something, or company coming, and where you didn't have to eat your whole meal. We have used it as a whole meal. That's what my mother would bring out, and to have coffee and sandwiches or cake and things like that. But I cannot say that I remember. And if I can't remember, I know Johnny, because he didn't know about it. So that must have been when they first opened the theater that they had that. And let Johnny tell you about bank night.
Before I do that, you asked about what it was like being brought up in the theater.
Yep.
Like she said, I'd have to fold the seats up and help sweep. While I did that, I did janitorial work there for years and years, but over the years, I did everything from to sell candy to sell tickets, take tickets, and I ended up as a projectionist.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. We had a fella named Lou Reed, who's done it for years, and he needed some time off, so he taught me how to do it. So I just tried not to do it on a Saturday night because that was my date night.
Yeah, you don't want to mess around with date night.
And my dad, when he booked the pictures, Caroline was talking about different. At the time, Tilton School was a prep school for boys only. And the Saturday movies in particular, he would book what he thought the boys from Tilton School wanted to see. And so we'd get a bunch of them come down, Saturdays, and sometimes Friday night if they could. But and then at other times, like on Sunday and Monday, he'd play a different night, maybe a musical or something. You get a different clientele. And so, consequently, using his expertise on what people like, that's how we played the theaters. As far as bank night, we used to do that on Friday nights. People could come in and register in a book and have their name in there. And actually, it ended up being there permanently, but between the first and second show on Friday nights, he'd go up on the stage and he had one of these roller things that put tickets in, and they'd draw names. And if they had to be there to win. The first prize was either 40 or 50 bucks. Second prize was either 20 or 25. Then he had a $10 one. But then after that, we had a big fish bowl and had stubs from the tickets that they sold that night. And they'd draw 5 consolation prizes. And, at least 5 people would go out of there with money. And we used to pack it on Friday nights. Everybody wanted to come and take a chance on winning money. And as long as I can remember, we had to go and put that bank night sign out. You put it on late Thursday night, so it'd be up there all day Friday and Friday night to bring the people in.
At times when we were like 10, 12 years old, we used to take out the window cards. And put them in the store. It would be a big, a card would put them in the windows of some of the stores and places that would tell which night what movie was playing and who was in it. And I just remember that.
Yeah, we used to put them around Tilton and Franklin.
Oh, nice.
And the cheapest price over in Franklin was 50 cents to go to a movie. The only difference in they had the cereals, where they had Superman or they would have the science fiction Buck Rogers. Okay. They had the cereal that you had to go every week to see what was going to happen, and we never had cereals. We just gave them cartoons. We always started out with the news. After the news, we'd get a short subject, which would be a little travelogue, or it would be one of the comedy ones that would last probably 10 to 15 minutes. And then we always had to have a cartoon, or probably they would have lost all the kids.
Well, except on Friday and Saturday, we always played a double feature.
Yeah, But it was the cowboy and the detective, wasn't it?
Always a cowboy, because that's what brought in the Tilton school kids.
I can definitely understand why.
Or it could be a war picture, too.
I would have gone just for the cartoons.
Yeah. But we look forward on Sundays and during the week to the cartoons. But then we just have a longer feature. The Westerns were usually like a half an hour shorter. And so we'd play 2 in the afternoon and 2 at night on Saturdays and Fridays. And as far as the price to get in there, I asked my dad one time, because we go to Franklin, it was double the cost. To go to Laconia, it was more than double the cost. And I said, well, how come we only get 12 cents? And he said, we have 315 seats. And he says, I'd rather fill them, all of them, then half of them at double the price.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because then you're going to sell a lot more popcorn and candy and potato chips, and you got a full theater to see what you got coming planned next week. So he had a good mind for that type of stuff.
I was going to say, yeah.
And when I see prices going up today, I keep thinking of that.
I know, the last time my wife and I went to the theater, it was almost $40 for the two of us between the tickets and the concessions.
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised you got your concessions should have been $40 already. I can't believe we make a trip to the Dollar Tree and buy a candy there, stick it in my purse, and then we give it out when we get to the theaters anymore. The few times we go, it's terrible.
It really
I don't
is.
know how they get that much money for popcorn, and we used to sell a great big bag of popcorn. What was it?
10 cents.
10 cents, and well, of course. I don't know how old you are, but we used to get a nickel, and we'd go to the either Muscadini's or Rafferty's stores, and we could get 5 kinds of candy for 5 cents.
Wow.
And you could get a big candy bar was a nickel. If you get the extra, I don't even think they had the extra large ones unless you wanted the big Hershey bars, but they were a nickel. With the ones with the almonds, Hershey bars, and we'd be able. Oh, you would believe all the stuff back in the 40s what the cost of, and now you go to even everything, even at the dollar stores, everything. Is $1.25.
Mm-hmm.
But and all those little boxes of your colored raisins. We used to, the chocolate covered raisins and chocolate covered peanuts. They were a nickel a box.
I remember when we were living back in Pennsylvania and we went to the drive-in, we'd have to buy a food permit if we brought in any outside food, and the food permit cost $10. Yep.
Well, I bet you that you put it in a purse or someplace under the seat. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Oh, they'd come around to the vehicles.
So much for the movie. Why do they have to gouge you on what to eat there?
I know, it's crazy. Well, I gotta ask you guys. I know your family has been around Tilton for a very long time, and you have deep roots. Tell me a little bit about how your family actually came to the area.
I believe my grandfather, Nono, and his brother came over around 1911. And they left their families behind, and they were going to go and bring them back after they got established and made some money. They started a restaurant in Manchester, which turned out to be a really good-sized restaurant, Italian restaurant. And eventually they brought my grandmother and the 2 boys over, and Nono's brother brought his family over. And they were in Manchester. Well, my grandfather had a couple of bad heart attacks. And after the second one, his name was John also. And I guess the doctor said, John, he said, you can't do this anymore. You can't be in the restaurant business or you're going to end up dying. So he sold the business to the guy that was a dishwasher. And the guy paid him so much a week until it was paid off. And in the meantime, he went to Keene and he bought a theater with another guy. I don't know how long that lasted, but he decided, I guess he wanted to be in business by himself. And there was a theater available in Tilton. So they moved up to Tilton, and my grandfather bought the business, and my father was the manager. Dad couldn't go into the war because when he was younger playing football, he damaged his knee. He had a metal plate, so they wouldn't take him in the service. So they left him to stay behind to help run the restaurant in Manchester until Nono had his heart attacks. But I can't tell you exactly what year they got into Tilton.
Right. No, that's okay. I mean, that's good information right there.
I would say it would be somewhere in the 20s.
Wow. That's crazy. I can't even imagine having to leave your family behind and making a move, but so many people did that.
I think I was born in 1935, and my mother was 26 when I was born, and I thought she had told me they had been married 3 years or 2 years before I was born. So if I was born in 35, that meant they got married, and she was 26 when she had me. So I think she, like I said, she probably was looking for a part-time job, and I don't know if she told me or seen a picture. I think there was a picture somewhere of her behind a popcorn machine. Mm-hmm. Now, we never had an inside popcorn machine in the theater. And there was a man, Johnny said that he remembered used to come and sell popcorn. But I remember in a picture, she was right in front of our main card that told what the movie was, which was right to the left of the doors going in. And there was a popcorn machine there, and my mother was behind it. So in my head, I'm thinking she probably got a part-time job making popcorn, and that's how Daddy and Mama met. And so I'm figuring that they probably met maybe 3 or 4 years before, because my mother, if she was 26, she probably, that's about, I would imagine, they probably were up in Tilton around 1921, or maybe 22 at the most. Mm-hmm. Because I think that would have probably been the time it would take my dad to find a girlfriend to marry.
I can definitely understand that.
And so, but they did that's one thing that was so nice. There was such a relationship between the people on Main Street in our day. I mean, I was heartbroken the first time I went home when I got older, after my children were growing, and I saw all the things. I mean, in the store, you could live in Tilton, never go outside of Tilton, and you would have everything that you had to have to live your whole life could be bought right there in Tilton. We have a men's store, what do you call it, mini department store. All that stuff was right there. And you next to Daddy's, the theater was your barber shop. And then what we have, couple of 3 barber shops. We had Walgreens, we had Rexall, and we had
Van Lawrence.
What was the other drugstore? The one that Mrs. Simpson.
Oh, Presby.
Yeah, Presby's. I think only one time in my life I ever had it there, because Herrick's had one. Oh, they really had the good chocolate milk, chocolate sodas, and then Walgreens had the best ice cream. They had the Hood's ice cream, and boy, it was good. And you had my grandpa, when I was small, had his plumbing company was right there on Main Street. Where was he? Where Walgreens was, or was it next door to where Walgreens was?
He was at one time where the Legion is, but then he moved up to be just the other side of where the park C.N. Brown Shell Station is, across from the town hall. he had a place that was down underneath.
Where when I went home
Yeah.
the first time, it was a antique shop.
Well,
Was it underneath it?
on top of where the shop was, they had the Odd Fellows and Eastern Star.
Yeah, well, actually, then it must have been when Johnny was too young to remember.
Yeah,
My grandpa had a shop, and I think, if I remember right, it's either where Stebbins was with the Walgreens, or it was right next door. Because I remember somebody gave me some roller skates to put on, and I'd never been on roller skates. I was little, and I went down to it was like a little step to go into the place, and I stepped down, and down I went.
Oh, no.
And I remember I scuffed my knees real bad. So that must have been when Johnny was a baby then, because he must not remember. But Grandpa had I remember he had all the pipes and stuff on the left side, and then Aunt B was at the desk on the right. And like I said, I was really small, so I don't remember whether that was the Walgreens, because the first time, but I don't think the Walgreens was there. So that must have been sometime between 1935 and 1940 that Grandpa had his there. My Grandpa Greenwood, and but all the years after, I spent a lot of time at the Walgreens. And every Saturday night when I was ushering, I would go so I could see the movies at Saturday afternoon. Then Nona and I would go to have dinner, supper at Walgreens. And I'd walk in, and Mrs. Stebbins would say, "Do you want the same thing, Caroline?" I said, "Yeah, I want a toasted peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a strawberry frap." And they made good ones. They weren't really skimpy like what you get today. And and then when I was really small, I would go with my aunt because she was the secretary for my Grandpa Greenwood, where Johnny told you he was, underneath that building, right behind Herrick's. And when he was in there, at lunchtime, my Aunt B would take me into Herrick's, and I saw a couple of pictures yesterday of there, and I was looking, I said, how many times I sat at that particular table, and she'd get us a sandwich, and after we finished, Aunt B loved sodas, and so she'd get us each a chocolate soda, and they made really good chocolate sodas in there. But like I said, you could buy glasses. We had what was the name of the place that made the glasses?
I don't know.
I can't remember
I'll think of it.
I know it. It was a big building, the last building before you came to the street that went over the bridge by Herrick's, the upper bridge. You go over to the Northfield side. So it was really. You go to the optometrist, you get your eye prescription. You went over there and you got your eyeglasses made. You pick your eyeglasses, which both of us have. I'm the only one that wore them when I was little. Johnny didn't wear them until he got older, did you? You were pretty old when you started wearing glasses.
Hey, she just called you old.
Well, older. You were probably 30 or 40 years old before you wore any glasses, weren't you?
I don't remember. No, I was probably in my 20s. I don't know.
Oh.
20s or 30s.
And also, Mr. Pettingill, I had some jewelry that was bought for my grandmother long before I was ever thought of, or probably when my mother was just a child. and it had Pettingill's
Really optical.
jewelry store on it. And he was still going strong when we were, I mean, right up until I was married. They were pretty old, but they still were going.
Wow.
What we're trying to think the name of it was Burley Optical.
That's it. And you could, how many, we had, what did you say yesterday, was 3 or 4 grocery stores?
You had a small A&P, you had a small First National, you had Muscadini's, you had Thibodeau's, you had Raffley's, you had Mike Meserve's.
I forgot about Mike Meserve.
Well, that was right in front of Burley Optical.
I love Meserve's. I'd go in there all the time.
I was trying to.
My daughter here just gave me a thing to remind me. Back when my nono first moved to Tilton, they lived on Park Street in Northfield, and he grew grapes and he used to make his own wine. And we ended up moving. They and my dad, our family, bought a house on West Main Street, which is now a dentist's office.
Okay.
He used to bury, evidently, his wine in the dirt cellar at his house in Park Street. Well, evidently, when we moved to West Main Street, it had a regular cellar. There was no dirt down there, so you couldn't keep it nice and cold. So I guess he brought it to the theater and buried several bottles down in the basement of the theater, which, by the way, every spring during the flood season, the river would rise and the water would come over. And several times we had to take the oil burner out from the furnace before it got ruined because it would get flooded down there. But anyway, after the theater closed several years later, they tore down the auditorium part of the theater, and there was just a big hole there for years. And then one day, I don't know, it was before they filled it in. One of my friends called and said, they found a bunch of wine bottles buried in the dirt down in the cellar of the theater.
Oh, no way.
And I said, well, gosh, I'd like to have some of those. I guess they sold them. I don't know who they sold them to. It would have been nice, even if it had turned to vinegar, I would have, just to have it,
Oh,
I would
absolutely.
like to have a couple bottles, but I don't know what happened to them.
Wow, can you imagine opening them now? What they would be like? Ooh.
Well, I know we had some
There'd
at
be
the
good
house.
vinegar.
Yeah, definitely.
With the last ones, at the time that we were teenagers, Nona would open them and she'd mix it and she'd make like a balsamic vinegar with it and to put on salads. So that's what we'd have. I don't know how. He had the machine that corked them real well and stuff, but he didn't have the complete processes that they do in a regular winery.
Right.
So, but 10 years later, it was still, because he had old wine, and whenever Nona's all the relatives would come up from Manchester, and they would have dinner down at Nono's down at their first house. They always would serve his wine, and it must have been good because they all were drinking it.
So I got to ask you, Caroline, do you have a favorite memory of Tilton? Whether it's growing up or when you got older. I mean, just something that sticks out. Anything in particular?
Mainly, we did. I don't know that when you're young you appreciate it, but I bet we Johnny and I are talking on the phone all the time. Have said a million times, we thank God for being raised when we were raised in the kind of town we were raised in, and because now we've got not only children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and I don't think there's a town in the whole United States that you could say, well, it was like Tilton in the years we were growing up. I mean, we had one cop, just the one cop, Pete Baczynski, and then we had one sort of a helper cop that would help the kids across Main Street, or if there was a funeral or something like that and they needed an extra policeman. He was for Tilton and Northfield, and we had 2 jail cells under the town hall, under the post office, which was underneath the town hall. Had two places for them. The only time they had anyone in it was a drunk on a Saturday night. We didn't have any really big crime, and I don't ever remember any bad things going on, really bad things in Tilton. Everybody was pretty happy people. You might have a teacher you didn't like, and or something like that, but basically everybody was pretty nice. It was a good, just an all-American town, and I really didn't really appreciate how great a place it was until I got older and started raising my family. Well, luckily, things weren't that bad when I raised my children. But with my grandchildren, I pray hard, and even harder for the great-grandchildren.
Right.
Because they won't ever know a world like we had.
So true. So true.
I mean, like I said, even you didn't have to lock your door at night.
No.
And my Nona, when we had the theater, would walk home. She'd make sure that everything was closed after the last show, which was all about 10:30.
10:30 to 11.
She walked all the way up, it was a mile, up to where we lived on West Main Street, that late at night, with all the cash from the theater that day. And you could talk maybe of Saturday or Sunday night. And by golly, she never had any problem. Now, if it was raining or snowing really hard, she might stop at the train station and get what was his first name? Terrian.
Well,
She'd get him to take her home.
Usually Lou Reed would take her home.
And even if you got the taxi, it was 35 or 40 cents. He'd take them. She'd always go with a ride then. But most every single night, she walked home. When I ushered, and I was a teenager, and I would go home, I never had anybody ever try to stop or anything. I think one time in my whole life, some boys yelled out the car door when they went by me. And West Main Street was number one, a 2-lane road, and that was your only way you could go unless you went the back way through Concord. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you made it up through New Hampshire. So all the main traffic went right by our house when it was on West Main Street.
Wow.
And I mean, that's to feel safe going home at 10 o'clock at night. And a teenager, I wouldn't let my father walk home by himself anymore.
Oh,
He'd
absolutely.
probably get shot.
Right.
But like I said, there was no place like Tilton. And if you were building a house, wasn't there a lumber yard down in Northfield? Yeah, so you could get your lumber, and there wasn't anything you couldn't buy at the hardware store, and both Johnny and I were taken down there to get our first bikes. I remember Mom and Daddy taking me down there, and he brings out the bike for my Christmas present. And same thing with Johnny when he got old enough to have a bike. And we only had one car. And I would say at the time we were raised, probably half the time, wouldn't you say, Johnny, didn't have any cars at all because they walked everywhere they went. What would you think, Johnny, about cars? Wasn't about only half the people in town had a car?
Well, even if they did, they still walked.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be my size, and Johnny wouldn't be his size if we were still walking.
Why not? I know my grandmother lived at the end of Granite Street. I'd walk up the trestle and all the way down Main Street and back every single day.
And how many times, and even before we used our bikes, or in the wintertime we didn't use our bikes, Mama would give us 12 cents to go down and buy a big loaf of bread at the First National. We'd walk down there and walk back.
Yeah.
You know, Alan?
Yeah.
You hear the expression that the 50s was the greatest generation. Believe it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, if we had a time machine and we could go back and actually just enjoy that time again, even for just a little bit, I think that would be so cool.
You know, it would be awfully nice if there was some way that every child born today, when they get of age, that they know what's going on, could be put back there for just one day and see what it's like to live in a society where people are moral, they're good American citizens, just for one day. Then maybe then when they pop back here, they'd say, gee, maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe we should start doing things like they did in those days.
Absolutely.
And people were so patriotic. And, you know, my grandfather, Greenwood, was in the Spanish-American War.
Mm-hmm.
And then my Baba Joe, which was my dad's younger brother, he and my Uncle Arthur were in the CBs. And where Nona used to have a Baba Joe's, the flag in her window with a star, with a one. Then we had Uncle Arthur in ours, and when we moved to West Main Street, both flags were in both windows, so you had two flags. And because we were brought up right during the war, and Johnny said that somebody went in and he was bragging about this stuff. Of course, he was long before he was born. All this stuff he knew by hearing things from his father about World War II, and he looks at Johnny and says, you wouldn't know you wouldn't know anything about that. And Johnny looks at him and says, how old do you think I am? Somebody told me that.
I was older than that.
We remember things. My daddy, they up above the Tilton School.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was across the street. Was it up where the mansion was?
Yeah.
Where the tower?
Well, it was, if you go to the top, across from the Tilton School, there's a street that, like 3 houses there, and it was out behind that. There was
a big tower.
Yeah.
And I got kind of bored going, but Daddy had to do his time up in that tower. But he used to take Johnny a long time, and he was just saying the other day, when he took Johnny, he'd always take him downtown to this little eating place and get him a donut and something to give him a treat for staying up there with him.
It was a civil defense tower.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember we had the dark green shades in all our windows, and when it got dark at night, the alarm would go off downtown, the fire alarm, and put those down. You were not allowed to open those curtains until it would go up again.
No kidding.
And we kids in school had to be, hide under your desk. Well, I mean, we had to go through the whole rigmarole just in case we were attacked.
Wow. Definitely a different time.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, like I said, and I do agree with you. I think kids definitely need to live in that time just to know what went on. Wow. I was born way too late in 71.
Well, I remember my mother buying Oreo margarine to cook with.
Mm-hmm.
It comes home. It looked like Crisco. It was in a square wrapper, and then it had like a capsule of this orange stuff. And so you'd let it get soft enough that you could put the capsule in.
Yep.
And you have to keep mixing it and mix till it was yellow, so it would fool somebody thinking they were. Oh, fortunately, we used to get it from Mr. Southwick, who used to come by. And I asked Johnny, and he didn't remember whether he had to explain how much butter he could sell. I don't know if they restricted, but you had to have coupons to buy butter. You had to have all this. My mother had a whole little thing full of coupons, and it was paper to buy milk, to buy sugar, to buy any kind of meat. Fortunately, my dad had some friends he could get some meat from, so we probably had a little more meat than some people did. But I can remember every Tuesday my mother would make donuts. And of course, like I said, her brother and two sisters was next door to her parents. Mm-hmm. And everybody on the Prospect Hill was friends, so there was a lot of people. So she'd probably make 3 to 4 dozen. Okay. My dad could eat a whole dozen himself. And one day I went home with my girlfriend, and her mother was making it on Tuesday, the same day. She was making them. And I tasted them. They were really good. The spices were the same, but it had a different taste. And I said, make it. I was watching her. She used molasses. And when I went home, I told Mama, I said, why was she using molasses to make and she said, because Daddy traded somebody for some extra sugar. She said most people, if they don't have enough sugar that they can make it, they use molasses.
Makes perfect sense.
And but of course every mother cooked in those days. Even if they worked, they cooked. Both you did your own bacon, and you could not go down, send us down to the grocery store and said, "Bring me home some frozen this or frozen that," because they didn't have frozen foods. We have things now we eat we never could have because they were raised in the South and they had to come up by refrigerated trains.
Sure.
But we always had good vegetables and stuff because everybody grew their own, and Mama canned. Everybody canned.
And you knew where it came from.
Oh, Johnny and I, even as little as he was, when he got old enough, I remember Mama buying us we had a little tiny hoe and a shovel and things like that. And when my grandpa had his big garden on the side of our house, he had a strip probably maybe 4 foot deep, and it went the whole length across the side yard. And we'd have carrots and lettuce and radishes. And what else?
People were encouraged to have the victory gardens during the war because they didn't have all the stuff available because of the war.
Oh, and we because you were so much younger, remember selling, you'd buy the stamps at school. They sold stamps, and the banks too were all selling war bonds. And even at the theater, they had the commercials and they buy your bonds today, and your stamps. But they had this little thing that we kids would get, a little booklet.
Yeah, I heard about those.
I don't know. I don't remember if they were a nickel or a dime, but we'd try to fill up those little books to give money to the government to fight the Germans and the Japanese. And I'd forgotten all about that.
It's so crazy.
They were still selling them when you went to school too, huh? And I remember one time, maybe it happened more than once, but I remember one time there was a man that came, and Daddy, between the shows, he went up on the stage and he was selling war bonds. And he wasn't selling the stamps, but he was selling the war bonds. And I don't know, they did something. They gave Daddy some coupons or something, for letting them do it. But yeah, they were, I mean, everybody, you can't imagine it, because you never lived when they had that kind of thing. You never saw that after 1960. But before 1960, this was a very, very patriotic country. And, I mean, they'd line up, to go, if they thought the country was in jeopardy, and the country said, we need your help, they didn't have to make somebody go. They automatically would line up.
Right.
And people were so much more able to do things and wanted to do things for their country.
It was definitely a different time, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
and it was just natural. See, we're trying to remember things, but it was just something we did. We didn't feel special. And even the things that we remember now, even as kids did. Like he said about the Victory Garden and buying these war stamps. I hadn't even thought of that in years until just now.
Mm-hmm.
That we did things like that. Oh, there is one other funny thing that I don't know that Johnny remembers doing it as much. Although I remember I think he did it like when he was in the second grade, that they would give out at school, and I thought this is when we lived on West Main Street, but then when I figured my age, I realized I knew the place because we moved there, but we were taking one of the fields they took us to was the field behind Mill Street. It was Mill Street, right, where Dougie lived.
Yeah.
Behind there was a big field, and I know it must have been the buses took us, and they gave us these big burlap bags that people got grain and stuff in, and the whole class would go out in the field. Now, they probably had fields other places too, but that's really the one I remember. And they would gather the milkweed, and they would fill the milkweed into the bags. And I remember when you got through, your hands are really sticky.
I can only imagine.
But we would have to fill those big old burlap bags full. And then when all the kids had got them all full, we would turn them into, I guess it was the bus driver, and they'd stack them in the back of the bus and take you back to school. And what we were told is, and don't ask me how they did it, that milkweed was used to make parachutes.
Really?
Now, I don't understand how that sticky stuff could go into make cloth, because I assume, isn't it cloth that parachutes are made out?
That's what I thought, yeah.
But
that's what they used. I remember that now. I had forgotten it.
And he's a great big tall 6-footer now, but he didn't start growing until he was probably in junior high school, and then but he It must have probably been dragging the thing on because he was probably really small. But that was during the war. That's how I remembered that it had to be before we moved over there. But I'm sure they must have had. I had never even known what milkweed was, but we sure learned in a hurry.
Well,
But then they said we did our
for
job.
your information, that's what the monarch butterflies eat.
Oh, it is. Well, and so I remember when you get back to school, that I would say, "See what you did for the army effort or whatever they called it," and so it made you feel really good. You did something great for your country, and that was pushed all through school when we were growing up.
Wow. I'm definitely learning a lot, that's for sure.
Well, that's why I'm telling you, every other time we talk, we're always saying at least one thing we do is thank God we were born when we were born and raised in a town like. I mean, I don't even really want to see Main Street anymore. I mean, all the things that were so important to us, because every store meant something to us.
Right.
Every landmark was something that was so deep ingrained in us. Well, I wish you could have experienced it, because I'll tell you, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. The only bad thing is, growing up, you don't appreciate it because you don't know any different.
Exactly.
Now, I guess if we were born in a big city and had moved to Tilton, we'd notice what was going on.
Yep.
We'd either like or dislike what it was, but I don't know that we would have appreciated it. You know, you just don't appreciate what you're surrounding because that's all you know.
Absolutely
We didn't know what
true.
it was like to live any other way.
You got
But
that
now
right.
we know, and like I said, we thank God every day for the times we had growing up.
Absolutely. Well, John Bruno and Caroline Bruno-Pfab, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us today for Talking Tilton. It's been a pleasure. Your stories are absolutely incredible.
Well, I appreciate talking to you, and I want to thank you, not for just interviewing us, but for all the interviews you do that are bringing people back to the good days in Tilton.
My pleasure. I have a good time doing them, and I am so glad that people enjoy them.
Thank you for calling.